Well, good evening, everybody. My name's Harold. I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me? Fantastic. All right. Well, it's always a privilege to come to this format and to be in any room of recovery and around our people. But this is a special place, and it blesses a lot of people. I wish I could come more often. I'm usually at the prison on Tuesday night, so I've bailed out to hang out with you guys tonight. But it's always a privilege to be invited to come. My sobriety date is April 7th, 1987. My home group is AA on the Rocks here in St. Louis, Missouri. Strong Three Legacy group that meets in the Shaw neighborhood right here in the inner city of St. Louis. Some of you have been to St. Louis, some of you have come to the group, some of you spoke at the group that are on here tonight. But if you do come to St. Louis and you're here on a Wednesday, I hope you look us up and let us host you. And if I get a hold of you early enough and you all know this, I will put you to work. I will get some mileage out of you one way or another. I come from a great line of sponsorship, and and I'm as involved in Alcoholics Anonymous today as I've been in 37 years. So it's always a privilege to share not just the good news, but the best news ever, really. Especially if you're powerless over alcohol and you're suffering and you're wounded and you're excluded and suffering from a fatal illness such as alcoholism, then there's no better place to be. I don't know of any other place to be, but right here, right now. And so all I'm going to share tonight is my what I've seen, what I've heard, and what I've experienced as it relates to the topic. And if you have your big books, it's just really centered on that first full paragraph on page 86. And it's just we're just trying to continue up the practice that we hopefully got going a little bit anyway by the time we get to this space. And that's just to continue to shine the spotlight of truth on our own lives and try to live a transparent life, which is really hard for all of us to do, all human beings to do, but especially alcoholics, because we're so self-centered and we're so concerned about what others think of us. So we always the tendency to want to look a little cleaner than you really are. Is if we're honest, has been honest since the day we were born, and regardless of how long you've been sober, that tendency can still be there today, and we're masters at it, and it's in our subconscious. That's why it's so there's so much delusion around it, because we don't even see that we do it, but we're truly masters at it, and we'll compromise the truth or the full reality even when the truth is just good enough, and we do it a lot. And it's kind of like this. It's kind of like the gentleman was fishing in a public lake in a park, and a little boy comes up on him and he says, "Hey, mister, have you caught any fish today?" And the guy looks at the kid and he says, "Well, if I catch this one and one more, that'll give me two for the day." And the kid goes, "Wow, that's awesome." And he rides off, not realizing the guy just told him he hadn't caught anything, but just to say that I hadn't caught anything uh, was just too much to bear. So, we're masters. And so the temptation to want to fabricate or elaborate on what's going on in our life, it's always there at some level. And hopefully that lessens tremendously as the longer we're here and we grow and we become comfortable in our own skin. We work through a lot of delusion in our life and realize that our self-worth is returned, and that we're loved by God, we're loved by others, and we're citizens, and we're more normal than not normal with the human race, and we get restored, and we get to be a member of society, and live in the world of the spirit. It's a beautiful thing if we stay here long enough for that to happen. So if you're new tonight, I really hope that you do that. But this practice of what I'm going to read this paragraph real quick, and then just kind of talk about my journey of trying to get to a place of transparency, which has been a struggle from day one. But I want to be as transparent as I can, really from the perspective of what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now, as it relates to transparency in our life and time constraints that we have. But I'm going to read this paragraph. If you got your book, it's right here, the first full paragraph. And but when we retire at night, and there's a key word there, we constructively review our day. And I'm not going to go through the definitions of that. You can look those up on your own. But I think that's an important word to look at our day. And do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once, which is the sentence I'm going to really hone in on. Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking about what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? And I think this is an important statement, that even though it may be a season of our life where we're not doing great, it says, but we got to be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or more of a reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making a review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken, end quote. And so that's just a powerful paragraph, and it's one where the imposter narrative in our minds can really work us over. And at this stage of your sobriety, you should, you could, you would. I mean, it's all that stuff. And meaning, if you listen to that narrative long enough in your head, it'll convince you that you're a fake, you're a fraud, you're a phony, you don't even deserve to be in AA, much less sponsor anybody. When you go through your moments, either of dark reflection, dark thinking, self-centered motives, or even pulling off some self-centered acts in your life, falling short of your chosen idea, falling off the spiritual beam. And, there's no blue ribbons hanging on any of our walls. I think we could all turn the cameras around in our room. There's no blue ribbons on anybody's wall for anything, but we try to become better, more effective, and live a life that I think is really based on 4 fundamentals. Number one, just a life of humility, a life of self-sacrifice, a life of other-centeredness, and a life of really going out into the world and trying to love everybody, including the people we just don't care about. But in order to get to that space, in order to live in that kind of framework, you have to get unclogged, and you have to deal with the spiritual separation that's in your life, that's been there long before you ever picked up a drink. And so that's the journey I kind of want to go on, is just talking about how I came to understand it when I got here, how I wrestled with that, how it was a struggle to be transparent, to look at myself honestly, and can continue that practice, and some of the pitfalls that's cost me, and but some of the victories of doing that, and kind of what it looks like today. And then we'll turn it back over to the team here, this wonderful team of people, and then let you guys have the meeting from there. I came to AA for the first time in 1979 to the Department of Corrections. That's where I was introduced to AA. And I didn't come to you. AA came to me in the space where I was in, and that was my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think it's always important to realize that newcomers, whether they're in a confined space or they're just walking out the streets into an AA facility or an AA clubhouse or an AA meeting, period, that we listen with our eyes and we think with our feelings. So we listen with our eyes, we watch what happens. And so how we carry ourselves, what we say, how we walk, how we talk is so imperative. I didn't know that in the beginning. I truly know that today. And hopefully tonight is that. I know this format, this group here tonight, is definitely an adequate demonstration of what recovery can be like, should be like, and look like, and hopefully an invitation for you to come live in it. But that's what I got the first time. I was nowhere near conceding I was powerless over alcohol, but the message was delivered, a part of a plea bargain on that. I'm not going to get into that tonight, but I ended up in a treatment center as it turned from 79 to 80, and I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in the public square, if you would. But I would not stay, and I left immediately, and I was gone for several more years. And through the Department of Corrections and a lot of trouble in 1987, I found my way back to recovery. And when I came home from the treatment program that I was in, back to face the trial here, the only thing I was concerned about was the trial. I wasn't worried about staying sober forever or going to meetings or being any of that. But luckily enough, I had a persistent friend. His name was Gary, who only had 2.5 months of sobriety. He was probably my age now. They kept calling me when I came back and stayed on me. And, hey, man, did you go to any meetings? I said, no, I haven't been to anything. Aftercare, nothing. And he asked me, why? Why haven't you done that? And I didn't really have a satisfactory answer to give him. I don't know why. And he says, well, man, your life depends on it. And I knew that was a true statement. And I didn't want it to be all transparent. I just didn't want that. I didn't want to have to try to figure out what living a life of recovery looked like, because it seemed very punitive, very shallow, and it seemed like it was going to last a long time. And I wasn't excited about any of that. But I finally got the courage to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it took me several months actually before I went to my first meeting after coming home. But I came in, and what I've learned, I guess, in 37 years of being in AA is that, there's 3 types of people that come to Alcoholics Anonymous. There's those who make it happen, those who watch it happen, and those who don't know what's happening at all, right? And I've been all 3 of those cats. I absolutely had no clue what was going on when I came to AA, and I sure watched it happen for a long time. I really didn't come all the way in and sit all the way down with this thing. I did the fellowship, which kept me alive, and I definitely don't want to minimize or water down fellowship. It saved my life. I was a rock and roll drummer. I got in a sober band right away. Went to the sober dances, played on the sober softball teams. All those fellowship events kept me here long enough to have the experience I needed to have. But you can only run that gamut, I believe, for so long. You got to get unblocked. You get this channel this is the channel that connects me to the world of the spirit and to you, the human race. That's been blocked my whole life. And I don't even know that. I have no clue that that's what's going on in my life. And it's been that way since I was a kid. And the pain of living this way, blocked with a spiritual separation, it starts, as soon as we can even walk and talk. And I see it. I just had the grandkids here for a week and a half. I can see this delusion of inequality in their life. I can see it manifesting in their life at 2 and 3 and 4 years old. I can see it. I can see what it looks like. I can spot it because I've looked at it in my own life, and I can see how young that it starts. And what you think of me paralyzes. And so I'm going to say whatever I need to say. A lot of times I don't know what to say. So it's just like, well, how are you doing here? Well, I'm doing fine. I'm good. I'm okay. Or I give you a head nod or some kind of lingo, so that not to ask any more questions or just to off me a little bit. And that started long before I ever found King Alpha. It's the deflection of the truth, this take the light off of me, because that was a dual thing going on in my life, from as far back as I wanted. Two things were going on simultaneously in my mind at the same time. If I walk into a space like tonight, part of me wants everybody to not only acknowledge me, affirm me, but I demand it. I almost need you to do it. I need you to affirm it. I need you to somehow or another, through eye contact, through body language, or just a audible automation that, hey, you and I are okay. There's part of me that really needs that and demands it. And the other part of me wants you to leave me to hell alone at the same time. These two dynamics are going on at the exact same time. So if you just come in and everybody just come in and say, hey, man, we're good, Harold, it would be a great night, but that's not reality. And so this narrative, this madness, if you would, between my ears would work me over. And then along came King Alcohol, and it lessened that. It quieted that, or it made it where I could cope with life. And that's why I love King Alcohol. The effect produced by it changed my life. So that's how I ran until I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I tried to grind it out here, just on really going to and playing music and doing fellowship stuff. But I was blocked. And you're not, and in my experience is, you're not going to stay here if you're blocked, because you're going to get burnt out on everything. You get burnt out on how it works. And I don't want to hear this guy talk anymore. I can tell you what she's going to say. And, it's just like you get burnt out. It becomes pathetic. And it doesn't happen overnight, but it definitely impacts your prayer life. Because when you're blocked, you're definitely not going to pray and meditate. Sure. You're not going to definitely get any kind of transparency with your sponsor. But slowly, just through a series of compromises, you'll fade out. And you'll be gone. And then, of course, you'll hear things like, well, meeting makers make it. Well, my life didn't change as a result of these meetings. I can promise you. My life changed as a result of the steps in getting unblocked. Meetings are important. They definitely provide inspiration and motivation and encouragement and accountability, but you have to get unblocked, and you have to remain now. And getting there is so hard, because we don't even know that that's what the deal is. But I finally got desperate enough, and I finally asked this guy to sponsor me. And I was almost 3 years in the program at this time, believe it or not. And I went to this guy's house. I could walk to his house. His name was Roy. And I asked Roy to sponsor me. And I sat down with Roy. And Roy says, Harold, you've been around now for about 3 years. Tell me about your life. I said, I'll tell you about my life, Roy. I said, I'm 25. I live in the basement of a house right up the street from you. I don't have any education. I don't have a GED. I got a criminal record. I don't have a driver's license. I don't know if I'll ever have the privilege to drive again. I got a piece of crap car that's held together by bumper stickers that I can't legally drive, but I do anyway. Roy, my life sucks. You can just take the word sucks. You can capitalize it. You can highlight it. You can italicize it. You can make a neon sign out of it and just put it, Harold's life sucks. Sucks. And that's where I was at. I was just totally blocked. I was, and part of that delusion is when you come to recovery and you put down King Alcohol, you're going to get better a little bit physically, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually, a little bit. You're going to make a bump in the right direction. And the delusion is that's enough. I'm good. And I can just continue this circle of just activity of going to meetings and not really engage in any of the work that's going to do unseparate the blockage. So, but you can only stay that way so long. And there's no template. There's no scale how long that takes. For me, it lasted. I was able to grind it out for 3 years, but I finally had that conversation, and this guy listened to me gracefully, and he said, Harold, I hear everything you're saying, man, and I'll be the first one. And to his credit, I'll be the first one to validate you've been dealt a really tough hand. There's no question about it. But I hope you're going to hear what I'm going to tell you. And he said, Harold, every single thing you have in your life, sitting right here, right now at my kitchen table, everything you got going on, you've attracted to you by the person that you become. And the day you're man enough to own that truth is the day you're on your way to some real change. But until you can own that, this vicious little cycle you're on, you're going to eventually drink again because you're not happy about your sobriety, man. And you can delude yourself all you want, but you're like a candle in the wind. And eventually that flame's going to go out and you will drink again. And if you drink again, there's no guarantee you'll ever put down the booze ever again. You'll ever draw a sober breath the rest of your life. And secondly, if you don't do that, you're going to end up like my dad. My dad was an alcoholic who could never get sober, and age 54, he took his life. That's how my dad stopped the pain. That's how my dad stopped the madness in his life. He just took his life. So you're going to do one or two things, man. You're either going to grow or you're going to go. And the $1 million question is, what do you want to do? And it's a question we all have to answer. And I think we have to answer that question more than once in our recovery, depending on what season of life we're in or what conflict or what events are going on in our life. We have to come back to that question. We're either going to grow or we're going to go. And but at that point, I knew he was going to say, let's work the steps. And like most of us, and Clancy used to say it best, the hardest thing any of us will ever do is take actions we don't believe in. And that's really the case. I mean, you're giving me a spiritual mathematical formula. Put the spiritual ahead of the material, and your life's going to straighten out. But the world system says put the world ahead of everything in your life, and you'll be something. And I chased that delusion my whole life. I mean, page 61, were we under delusion that we could wrest satisfaction out of this world if we could only manage it? Well, yes, I was under that delusion long before I ever drank. The world system gave me that. And it still gives me that. It still deals that up every single day of my life. So buying into that formula of the spiritual mathematics where 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, and putting the spiritual ahead of the material. I mean, your life pretty much has burnt to the ground before you're going to be willing to do it. I mean, at least that's my case. But I became willing to do that. And that started with a 30-step prayer and then an inventory. And this is my first attempt at really dealing with this spiritual separation and this blockage in my life. And I never, at this point in my life, ever sit down with anybody unless you had all the evidence. I mean, I might sit down with a detective who had all the film and the evidence and the eyewitnesses and a bunch of people who turned on me, and I might come clean in a plea bargain or something. But other than that, I ain't telling you anything about me. And it was on me. And so I went to my sponsor's house, Roy, and he gave me a yellow notebook pad. He said, let's start this inventory. I said, well, I don't even know how to start, man. He says, well, just write big bold letters right across the top. I'm a liar, I'm a thief, and I'm a cheat. And if you get off this track, just refer to the top of the page. And he was teasing a little bit, but he was trying to make it light. But we got into this exercise, and he said, let's start with resentments. And I'd never even heard the word resentments. I'm a rural Ozark Mountain hillbilly. I can promise you resentment wasn't even in the classroom growing up. There was no such word. So obviously, if I don't know what it means, I must not have it. It was my kind of thing. But he said, let's interchange that word. Have you ever had any conflicts in your life? I said, man, I've been in conflict my whole life. He goes, that's what we're talking about. Let's talk about those. And so we started this exercise of looking at conflicts. And this blockage it's so full of delusion. We can't see it for what it is. So I'm working through this list of people, and right away he's looking at this list. He goes, hey, where's your dad at, man? I go, what are you talking about? He goes, how come your dad's not on your list? I said, because I never knew the guy. I only met the guy a couple of times. The last time I saw my dad, man, I was 14 years old, and he came to it. The first time I ever got sentenced, he came from Oklahoma to the trial to watch his only son at that point get sentenced. I mean, that's the last time I saw my dad, years ago. And when I did get sober, I had a sobriety, and I went to go look him up. I found out he died back in 1986. He'd been dead 2 years. I didn't even know it. That's how separated our lives. But this delusional mind is, I'm good with that. I can promise you by the time I got done with this inventory, I had a great big hole in my soul, and it was in the shape of a dad. Right? But that's not how it started out. So, discovering the truth about yourself and bringing it out of its hiding place, it's hard. And as our 4-step says, to conclude that others was wrong was about as far as most of us ever got. Right. And that was it, because I was ate up with victimization, ate up with, I'm here because of you. My life jacked up because of you. And that delusion is powerful. It had me by the throat and against the wall, and his claws buried into my throat. and there's probably maybe some victims going on here tonight that are suffering from that victimization, and some of it's very justified. That's the problem. I mean, we suffer abuse, physical, mental, spiritual, sexual, going down the line. We have a tough life, dealt a tough hand in life, and so you have a lot of co-signers and even enablers who will sign off on the victimization list. So it's hard to toss that card. But if you're going to get unblocked and enjoy the promises in this new freedom, this freedom from bondage, you gotta get there. You gotta be willing to get there, and don't try to force it. But I mean, you got to keep pressing on, and eventually you will. I was able to finally toss that victim card, and it changed my life. I can promise you. To get to that space, and I never in my entire life ever sit down and try to shine the spotlight of truth on my life and take any ownership for it. Never at this point in my life, ever. And so it was difficult. It was a difficult task. And so my pat answer when we're going through this inventory work, my sponsor would look at me and say, what's your part in that? And I would look at him like a deer in headlights, and he'd say, he had a little wooden sign, 3-story up on the wall that said, I don't know. And he'd point to the sign, and kind of laugh at me. I don't know was always my answer to everything. I don't know what that part was. And his wife thought that was comical. So she had another little wooden sign that said, do you want to try the truth? And it hung on this wall. So you had, I don't know, and do you want to try the truth on the kitchen wall when you went to this guy's house to try to, unpack your life. And so when you said, I don't know, he would point to it and giggle, but then he'd point back to, you want to try the truth, and laugh even harder. And so that was my spiritual interrogation, if you would, of uncovering the things that were blocking from me, from you, from God. And so I went through that routine, and eventually page 75 changed my life. I mean, I finally shared everything that was here, all the secrets, the things that I planned to take to the grave with me, mostly sexual in nature or crimes I committed I never got caught for. That stuff I was taking to the grave with me. And the delusional part is the very thing I think I'm going to take to the grave is what's going to put me there. And I don't even understand that or even can comprehend that at the time. But it's the truth. But I was able to finally get that out, paid 75, and I'm for the sake of time, I'm just paraphrase it, but it basically says that at this stage of your life, when you've shared your entire life story, it's when most of our members say not only have they had a spiritual awakening, but they've had their first real spiritual experience. Why? Because the channel is unclogged. It's not fully unclogged, but it's unclogged enough that I believe that the sunlight of the spirit can finally shine in on our soul. And I would define the soul as our mind, our will, and our emotions. And for the first time, the Spirit of God, the grace of God, the mercy of God, the sunlight of the Spirit, and shining on my soul, and it feels amazing, and it feels so good that I don't want it to go away. And this unconditional love, this agape love experience, kept me here. I mean, you see it play out in treatment centers. I'm in treatment centers all the time, every week, and I watch the transition of people who come in after there a few weeks, and it's time for them to go home. They don't want to leave. And when I asked the group, I said, what are your biggest fears? It's always two things in this order. Number one is fear of relapse. But the second thing is always the fear that this experience, and they would never define it as love. They would just say this connection, this community, this whatever. I don't know how I'm going to recreate this when I leave. But this level of equality that AA gives us, especially with the traditions, the tradition just brings us all to an equal plane. We're just equals here. And to share in that experience where you're not judged by your past and your crimes and your sexuality and your gender and your politics and all that stuff. You're just, hey man, I'm glad you're here. And that exercise of equality and acceptance, your illness has no defense against. That love, that experience that. But to really get to that deep, you got to get unclogged to stay it. And then that sunlight of the spirit gets in on your soul, and you start to heal. And then you go back and start reconciling with the people of your past, with all the hearts you broke and all the bridges you burnt. You start to have this amazing restoration. You get restored. Huge word in recovery is restoration, to be restored to what you may have never been, that may have never materialized in your life, but now it is. You're becoming the best version of you. You're becoming the person that God always created you to be. And it's when the impossible becomes possible. And that's the beautiful thing about it. That you remove enough of this blockage, this delusion in your life, that you finally start to see that you're worthy. You're not as dumb as the narrative says you are. You're not as a piece of crap as the narrative says you are. You're not hopeless to the point that it's never going to be anything other than this, like the narrative always said you were. And you start not listening to the narrative finally starts to shut up. And then you start to do what my sponsor said. My sponsor, Tom, who's my sponsor most of my sobriety, Tom would say, when preparation meets opportunity and God does the introduction, great things can happen. But if you're not prepared for those opportunities, it will pass you by. But when you get unblocked, and you start to heal and your soul starts to heal, now you're starting to get prepared to answer those opportunities. And as Tom would say, when God's got work for you to do, the walls come down. And the walls come down. And so the impossible became possible in my life. And anything and everything you could ever think of that person could ever accomplish or achieve, I've experienced. I got 7 initials behind my name. I went back to school in my 30s and finally got a GED. Finally walked across the stage and got a bachelor's degree and stayed on the dean's list, believe it or not. Sent my mother a bumper sticker that said, "Hey, your kid made the honor roll." When I'm 30-something years old, it was a lot of fun in our family. But eventually walk across stage and get a master's degree in business and write my whole thesis on starting a business from scratch and selling it. And I'm not done that once, not twice, but 3 different times. And eventually walk across the stage and get another master's degree and almost done with a doctorate degree, believe it or not. So I've accomplished a lot of things. The impossible has become possible in my life. And I know there's nothing that I can't do if it's a thy will, not my will situation. There's nothing that I can't do when the Spirit of God is guiding that. But we go through all this work to get, I think, prepared to be a trusted servant. I mean, that's the end game, is to be a trusted servant, to go out into the world and live a life of humility, self-sacrifice, other-centeredness, and learning to love everybody. And so we get set out on a course to that. But because of the 2 bogeymen, as the 12 and 12 would call them, the pride and the fear, we got to watch out, because this is where this becomes real important. Because no matter how much success you have in your life, you're still a fatally flawed human being, and self is never going to be fully eradicated. Self shows up all over the place. It manifests itself. It hides in different corners. This is why we need sponsors as much today as we ever did. We need somebody who's not emotionally or financially invested in our life, who can look at our life with clarity and help us shine the spotlight of truth, not only on ourselves, but on the areas of the life where self is really rearing its ugly head. And so we have to be on the lookout. But those 2 monsters, pride and fear, will step up and cause you to live in the delusion of 80-20 is what I call it. And it happens in all spiritual contexts, whether it's religious, whether it's spiritual, whether it's secular, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous. It's there, that 80-20 rule. And it kind of looks like this. I'll tell you what's about 80% of what's going on in my life, and you tell me about 80% of what's going on in your life. Don't ask me about the 20, and I won't ask you about your 20. And then my grand sponsor, Bob, would really lean into that piece of it. But that delusion of 80-20 is powerful, and it's driven by pride and fear. And what that looks like, I had early on in my sobriety, I had an old timer named Lewis. He's passed away now, but Lewis was great. Lewis was an African American man who didn't have any education, who was 40 plus years, probably died close to 50 years sober, who was a 12-step warrior, a hero of mine. And he sounded like B.B. King when he talked. Yeah, yeah. You could listen to him talk. As soon as he opened his mouth, he just shut up and listen. I got a whole book, seriously, of one-liner Lewisisms from my life. But one of the best ones he ever gave me was centered around this very subject. And I was sitting in a meeting one night early on in sobriety, and I vomited my problems out in the meeting. And this is what Lewis said to me, and I'll never forget it. Because I was complaining about the circle of friends I had, said I wasn't being honest about some particular area, but I couldn't even tell you what it was about at that time. But some area of life, I wasn't being fully transparent. So this is what Lewis said. He goes, right in the middle of the meeting, he says, "Well, Harold, sounds like you got a problem with the crap sandwich." And he just looked at me and shut up. And everybody's looking at me, and I'm looking around. Nobody's saying nothing. I finally said, "All right, Lewis, I'll bite. What's the crap sandwich?" He goes, "Well, I'm glad you asked," he said. He said, "The pride's one piece of bread and the fear is the other. And you know what the problem with the crap sandwich is, Harold?" And I said, "What's that, Lewis?" "You're the one eating it." And I'll never forget it. And I've dined on a lot of those crap sandwiches over the years. I mean, might even have a little brown stuff on my chin now if I'm not careful. So that, when we get back to this paragraph, and we ask ourselves that question, have you kept something to yourself which should be discussed with someone at once? Well, that sounds really easy to say yes to. But the temptation, because of pride and fear, is I'm only going to tell you about 80% of it. and I'm going to try to manage my way through the other 20. And it can lead to a very downward spiral, and it happens a lot. And Lord knows it's fallen on my doorstep more than once. And and so that's what I think we have to watch out for. And this is why I think this practice of nightly review is imperative in our lives, that we don't, we do all this work to get unclogged. We have this amazing spiritual experience. The sunlight of the Spirit pours in on our soul, and we start to heal with our mind, our will, and our emotions. And the impossible becomes possible. And we live this storybook life. And the reality of it is it can be gone in a flash if we don't continue to try to live this out. Because what's our book, how it works, say, rigorous honesty. We have to live by this. And yet it's the hardest thing to do. My sponsor, Roy, told me, Harold, right off the bat, he said, there's three things I can tell you about an alcoholic. One, they lie. Two, they lie. And three, they lie about lying. That we always want to fabricate and elaborate on what's going on in our life, to look a little cleaner than we are, or to look a little worse off than we are. And if you don't think that's true, just go play golf with some guys in the program. And I guarantee you'll find out exactly what I'm talking about, because you'll watch them hack their way to the hole, and I'll say, what do you put me down for, man? And they said, oh, just put me down for a 5. Well, it was a 7, at least a 7, but they just put me down. It's sad. Like somehow or another, 99 is going to look better than 95 at the end of the day. The suck factor is high no matter what, but it just, it just is, because of pride and because of fear. And those two things can be the bogeyman in our life. And so that's why I try to do this. I'm definitely not perfect at it. I send it to my sponsor. I send it to the guys I sponsor. I have some additional questions I've added to it over the years, but it's a practice that I don't want to say legalistic or religious about, but I don't miss a day. I try to be very serious about it, even though it's half measure sometimes. It's not everything it needs to be, but it's enough for that when me and my sponsor get together once a week, that he's got 7 days of something, some dialogue in my life for the week to have conversation around. So it's important. So this practice, we want to stay unclogged the best we can, because life is going to come. I mean, things are going to get in here. You're not going to prevent things from getting here. If you live long enough, you're going to get old. You live long enough, you're going to age. You live long enough, life's going to happen, not just with other people, and it's going to get in your channel, and we have to keep practicing this stuff to keep it out and to live this life of love and service. And it's a beautiful way to live. If you're not living it, I hope you stay long enough to live it. But it's been a great life for me. So I'm totally grateful for this meeting, for you people, for the level of sobriety. I got a lot of people I love dearly on this tonight. And so thank you for allowing me to come and share, some of what's going on in my life. And most importantly, thank you for my life. I got an incredible storybook life, and that's all I got. Thank you.
Benny?
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
I'm Benny. I'm an alcoholic. Harold, I thank you for your talk. And you mentioned, so I'm just going to make a quick question, because I think it's important what you said. I experienced what you said, because my sponsor said to me, I'm going to ask you, Benny, to take actions that I know you don't believe are going to be good for you, but I want you to try them anyway. Could for new people, because I think that was so important for me to in my getting honest and getting real. And if you could, how do you say that? Expand on that, if you don't mind, for anybody that's new here. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ben.
I think it's right. I think it's just because of how the human race is and how we're raised. I mean, we're raised in a we're ate up with individualism, consumerism, secularism, and materialism. That's what drives our culture, and it drives our lives. And we're probably one of the only cultures, definitely here in the West, where we define who we're going to be. I mean, if you go back and look at history through time, most cultures raise you up, they give you your self-worth, and they groom you, and they tell you who you're going to be. But here in the West, we decide we're going to be. We started when you're young. What are you going to be when you grow up? It's when it starts. And I wanted to be a rock and roll star. I wanted to be Peter Criss from Kiss. I wanted to sex, drugs, rock and roll, live a rock and roll rebel life. And I needed you to affirm it, but also demanding that you. Well, it's an impossible ask. And it's that you chase, and it's always more. And I'm going to get here, and I'm going to get that. And what I discovered in my life is more only makes you more what you already are. But when you get here and you don't have anything and you burnt your life into the ground, call me crazy. Call me crazy, but I think I could be a little bit more spiritual if I had a few $100s in my pocket and a legal driver's license and a car that wasn't held together by bumper stickers. And I didn't have a criminal record. And I didn't live in the basement. And I had a job that actually paid some with some benefits. Call me nuts. But when I get that, then this delusion is I'll be affirmed and I'll be okay. And then I'll be accepted. And then I'll be somebody. That's the same delusion, a lie I bought long before I ever got here. I call it the delusion of inequality. The delusion that I am not enough. And I can be greater than I can go from hero to zero in about 10 seconds. But at the end of the day, it's that delusion that drives my life. And it still can today, if I'm being transparent. It still can today. What you think of me can still influence my life today. I wouldn't want to know all the choices I made in my life based off that delusion and you take social media, well, put that on steroids. That's how powerful that delusion is today. So to take actions that say, look, I know you're worried about not having a car. I know you're worried about not having a license. I know you're worried about not having a place to live. But right now, I just want you to work on the spiritual, and the rest of it will take care of itself. Well, you got to pretty much burn your life in the ground before you're really going to do that. You trust that long enough to really give any agency to it. But when you do, well, all of a sudden it changes. And of course, I asked my sponsor, how will I know when that's happened? And he said, well, you're the Ozark Mountain Hillbilly, correct? And I go, yes, sir. And he goes, it'll sound like this. And I'll let you guys wrestle with what that is. All right. Thank you.
Courtney, come on in.
Hello, everyone. Courtney, alcoholic addict. Harold, thank you for your share. I just found myself doing a lot of self-reflection and some of the things that you were speaking about and thinking, am I staying on top of what I'm supposed to be doing? The 80-20 really stuck out to me. It's like, God, how honest am I really being? But my question for you is, you said you added some questions into your nightly review. I'm wondering if there is a question that you've added that you find is very important in that step that is helping you look at other things, or if there's a few questions that you've added that you feel would be of importance for other people to maybe look at to help them with that step 10, to be more honest in that.
Yeah, well, let me do this real quick. Give me a second. I'm going to do it right this second. It'll be easier just to do this. I'm going to text this to Ollie and have him just, if he can, somehow or another figure. He's a smart guy. He'll figure out how to put that in chat, and then you'll just have these questions. You can get it that way. But so the first several questions are just the ones we just read tonight, and I have this in a yellow notebook pad on my phone, and I just copy and paste this into a text, and then I just fill it out and send it in. I use notes, so I do it in notes and then copy the notes out and then send it out, and it works out really well for me. And let me see what I got. Yeah. I'm just gonna leave it as is, because there's some of the things I put in there last night, but I don't have any problem with any of it. So I'm just gonna send it to Ollie real quick and let him show it. But you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see the questions I'm talking about. And then I just sent it. I think I did. Well, there you go. I just sent it to him. But some of the questions, and you'll get them here, but some of the additional questions are sent around. So the first one is, so diet and nutrition always been a challenge for me to stay regulated at. So I try to stay accountable to it, to, where I'm at, with physical self, diet, nutrition, etc. Staying accountable to that, what I'm doing, and that's been helpful to me. What did I read today? What am I reading? And trying to be committed to reading 20 minutes a day, and then writing what I'm reading. Putting in there. What was my God shot today? Because I want to end on a positive. I want to end with hope. We're in the hope business. We're hope dealers, and so I want to end with that. I don't want to end my night in morbid reflection about my day. I want to end in positive. But what is my God shot? There's several, but I just picked one. What is the big one? One of them, the one yesterday, was a friend of mine who I've known for years. Called me about 2 years ago and said, I'm thinking about going through this process for the pardon. I know you've been down that road and helped others with it. Can you give me some direction? I gave her some direction. She took the direction. Yesterday, she called me with her letter from the governor of Oklahoma and said, hey, I got my pardon. She got pardoned. That was my God shot. So that's just one example. Um, who do I need to send love to today? So, comes from my boys in Nashville, this idea of sending love, instead of who do I got to pray for, which is great, but who do I need to send love to? I always like that visual of sending love out. If I'm sending it to Ollie or whoever on here, just you send them love. I can almost see it going. And so I have a list of people that are going on in my life at that particular minute that I'm trying to do that with. So those are the additional questions. And another one that I don't have on there right now, but I add it from time to time is how is your soul? And your soul being your mind, your will, and emotions. How's your soul? And so those are the questions. Extra questions. All right. Thank you. Great question.
Calvin, you're up.
Hello. Thank you, Alice. Hello, everybody. My name is Calvin. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Cal.
Harold, thank you for a strong message. And every time I hear you, I get so much from you. And I was thinking about, when you talk about playing golf and somebody putting the numbers up and changing them around and stuff. And I think about we lie when the truth are due, right? That was real interesting. But what I want to really say is to you is that I remember you speaking at the Jersey Shore at the retreat down there about a year or two ago, and you did a tremendous job. And you came to my little humble group in New Jersey. You didn't come; you came by Zoom, and you gave us the same power that you did at that retreat. Over 200 or 300 people, you brought to my 35 people the same energy and the same power. I knew I really liked what you had. And that's a powerful thing. It don't matter where you at. You bring the same energy with you. And pair of lips say anything, but you watch them feet, and your feet go in the right direction, Harold. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much for being out. Thank you.
Thanks, Calvin. Always great to see you, brother.
No doubt.
Thank you. Love you. Okay. My friend Allison, come on in, please.
Thanks, Alice. Hi, I'm Allison. I'm an alcoholic. What a great share. Thank you, Harold, so much. It's good to see all y'all. I really enjoyed how you talked about identifying being blocked by sitting in a meeting and being annoyed by the speaker you hear or getting sick of listening to chapter 5. And it took a sponsor to point that out to me, that was indicative of my broken spirit or the spiritual unrest I was living in. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. Any stories that you relate to that or personal experience with that and what you've done about it?
Yeah. Well, it's there's so many. I mean, thinking about how quick, when the book says that resentment's the number one offender, I mean, that's what they're talking about. Because the minute that just like a big rock in my channel. I mean, the minute I get anything like that going on, because it consumes me, it owns the title to my soul, and I freely give it over. And I'll take showers with it. I'll take it to work with me. I'll sleep with it, and I'll water it. I'll put Miracle-Gro on it. And the reason that it's so hard to get rid of sometimes is because I'm the one who created it most of the time through my twisted perceptions. So you're asking me to get rid of a piece of work that I spent so much time and energy. You want me just to pull it up and discard it? But it is hard because, and especially, in recovery rooms, I love the Grapevine quote that I saw in a magazine when I was early sobriety. I was reading the Grapevine and reading one of the cartoons, and the cartoon was great. There was a newcomer sitting across the table from the sponsor, and the voice cloud said to his sponsor, new guy, he says, man, I really love everybody I met in AA. And his voice cloud over his sponsor's head said, well, you ain't going to enough meetings. It's that, that, people don't come here, and you're going to collide with people. You're not always going to agree with people. You're not always going to be in the same season of life or on the same journey in recovery or experience recovery the same. And just petty stuff like that, and you just think about the last few years, how the preamble coming out and now the plain language big book and all these things, and how they can make they can create a lot of venom and divisiveness and polarization, even inside of spiritual contact. And I just don't want to get sucked into that, and trying to keep that, keep that out of my channel. I don't want this to block me, in it. And I watched a lot of, people that I love and respect, really get lost in some of those things. And that's how easy it is. I mean, it's how fast it comes. And it's because of pride and because of fear, Pride is, I like it the way it is. Fear is, you're going to take something and ruin it. And those two dynamics going on at the same time become very deadly, and it can lead to a lot of ugliness out of all of us. So So yeah, it's just that kind of stuff, Allison. I mean, we all have it. Like I said, you stay here long enough, you're going to experience adversity. We just lost a good friend in St. Louis, Kelly, who passed away today from cancer, and she's been battling it for a long time. But today, she took her last breath, and the breath of life left her, and she goes on to where she goes to, and she'll be missed. But those things come and they go, and it's hard to. Life's hard sometimes, you know. It's and that stuff gets in our channel, and if we don't have a way to get it out, it'll stay there. And if it stays there long enough, I can find myself into a real dark space, and the longer I'm in it, the harder it is to come out of it. And so I just don't want to get personally. I just don't want to try to get to that space. And so I try to stay in the middle of the boat, man, the best I can, and I do it imperfectly for sure. So thank you. It's a great question.
Ralph, please come in. And Muriel, if you're still there, please come back. Ralph?
My name is Ralph White. I'm an alcoholic. Mr. Long.
Alfie, what's up, baby?
It's good to see you, my brother. I have a quick question for you. You touched on it in what you were just talking about. 37 years in, so staying green, and everybody's got a different gift. We don't talk about that as much. There are different, I call it your wheelhouse or what it is that's your passion. So 37 years in, and you just had a discussion with somebody about what keeps me green, what keeps me fresh, what stops it from getting stale. What have you hung your hat on in all your sobriety that is the thing that still gives you the most juice?
That's a great question, and I know it's the same thing that gives you the juice. So you could just answer your own question, but it really works out like this. And the analogy was given to me a long time ago to help me understand it. But somebody held up a glass of water one time to me, and they said, Harold, he said, if I filled this water all the way up to the top, question I have for you, can I put any more water in it if I fill it all the way up to the top? And they said, well, the answer is no. Well, the answer is yes, but before you got to do so, you got to pour out what's already in before you can put any more in it. And I never forgot that illustration because that's really AA at its finest. If you're not carrying the message, I mean, really out there trying to carry the message, which is our primary purpose, you know, and our group purpose, then you miss the magic. And the magic, I mean, in all sincerity, 75% of the AA that I do, what I would call my grassroots AA here in St. Louis, is 75% is in a confined space. I go to my home group on Wednesday nights. I'm in the treatment center twice a week. I'm in the prison once a week. Those 4 meetings are my core meetings. Yes, I get to do some things like this, but that's just whipped cream and the cherry on top. But the core is going into those places, and that's the stuff that gets me fired up. Tonight, right now, right before the meeting started, a guy from Springfield, Missouri, was trying to call me because he just went to Sedalia, Missouri, which is in the middle part of Missouri, to go pick up a guy that I just hooked him up with out of treatment. They were trying to call me in the car to say, hey, man, I got him in the car. We're on our way back to Springfield. And I just want to let you know, thank you for hooking us up. He texted me when he was calling. That's what gives me the juice. You know, that's what gets just walking shoulder to shoulder with other people and helping them rediscover life and watching the magic happen and having the front row seat. Spiritual electricity, spiritual intoxication. And it's I'm a get high freak, so I love that intoxication. So great question, Ralph. Thank you.
Great answer. Muriel, you have our last question. Please feel free to come on in.
Okay, hi. Hi, Harold. It's I'm saying hello from Canada to St. Louis, Missouri, not misery. Anyway, you had a wonderful talk. I bless you. Thank you so much. You know, I've been around for a few years as well. And I've read a number of books. I've read Drop the Rocks, The Spirituality of Imperfection, Emmett Fox, The Sermon on the Mount, and, you know, and The Language of the Heart, which is one of my beautiful, I just adore that book. But you talked about books on diet, right? Because I studied to become a fitness instructor, but I felt insecure while I was taking the course. So I didn't pursue, I don't know, you know, being a fitness instructor. However, I go to the gym about 4 or 5 days a week, and I think it's so important that we be mentally and physically. What's that?
Muriel, we are out of time. Do you have a quick question for him?
Yeah, I
please?
wanted to know what books he's read.
Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, Muriel, why don't you get my information and I'll send you some. That'll be easier. All right.
Okay.
I'll text it. I'll email it or text it to you. I'll put my email in the chat.
Wonderful. Harold, thank you for a beautiful, beautiful talk. Again, you guys, thank you for allowing me to be of service. Back to you.